Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those over on the East Coast. It's great to have you all with us. I hope you enjoyed that amazing video. I've seen it many times and I always see something different in it, and it's a great representation of the breadth of work that Bush Heritage Australia is doing across this amazing country of ours. Before I get any further, I'd just like to introduce myself. So I'm Luke Bailey and I'm talking to you on Amangoo, Nuggaja and Willenoo country in Geraldton over here in Western Australia. I'm the Executive Manager for Western Australia and South Australia. So I have an amazing job and I get to work with amazing people, and including the supporters and donors that we have on this call with us from across Australia and across the world. I've been with the organisation for nearly 9 years, and some of you will have known me as the Reserve Manager from Charles Darwin many years ago. And I have a great love and respect for everything Bush Heritage does and the work that its supporters and donors do to make our planet a better place. So the focus of these forums is really to share the important and exciting work that we're doing, and in this case on the Fitz-Stirling region, as I mentioned. It's to give you as donors and supporters a deeper understanding of our work. Given this year, a lot of people haven't been able to get out and about onto our reserves. There's been restricted movements, as you all know. So by having these forums, we can stay connected to you all, and you can stay connected to the Bush Heritage team. It's also important to recognise that the work that Alex and Angela are going to be talking about is very specific to a really special landscape down there in the south coast of WA, but it has global implications. And the work that Bush Heritage does, we've been going for 30 years now, come next year, is internationally significant and addresses several sustainable development goals that have been identified by the UN. So I think it's really great that today you'll get to see some really local detail of the science and conservation work we're doing, but also know that that's feeding up to globally significant science, and also leading ways on how we work more collaboratively with our community to care for landscapes and to make biodiversity and working with traditional owners more effective across all of Australia and the world. So with all of that, I hope you have a really engaging and interesting next 30 minutes with us. I'm going to pass you over to Alex, who I've had the great pleasure of working with for probably, 3 or 4 months now. Alex has come with us to Bush Heritage relatively recently. He's had a great career in conservation across WA. He graduated from University of Western Australia and most recently has been working with the Nature Conservancy out of Albany. He's born and bred down in the South Coast region and is deeply committed to that part of the world. And it's a great pleasure to have Alex as part of our team down there. And he's carrying on the good work and building on the work that Simon Smale, who many of you would have known, was with us for over a decade and who's retired and gone and set up life back in his homeland of New Zealand. So Alex is relatively new, but he's settled in really well, and I'll pass it over to Alex to do a bit of a broad update and then to introduce Angela to you. So over to you, Alex.
Okay, so first of all, I'd just like to start by acknowledging the Menang and the Korang Noongar peoples as the traditional owners of the place where we work and where we're meeting with you today, and to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging from this area. As many of you are aware, and as Luke just pointed out, Bush Heritage works throughout Australia in a number of priority landscapes. And as you can see from this map, we're spread right across the nation. Overall, we work on over 11 million hectares of land and provide a really great way to provide conservation in some of those priority landscapes. Within the southwest of Western Australia, one of the focal points in our area is the Gondwana Link Initiative. Now, this is a bold plan to connect the fragmented landscape between the forests right in the southwest Capes near Margaret River over here, and right the way through the south coast region all the way to the goldfields towards Kalgoorlie and the western woodlands that are present within those areas. Of course, we can't work across that entire landscape. given that it's over hundreds of kilometres across. Bush Heritage certainly has a really strong focus on the 70-kilometre section between the Fitzgerald River National Park and the Stirling Range National Park, and that's why we call it the Fitz-Stirling. Within that area, and this is just a close-up map of that area, Bush Heritage works in a number of properties across that space. As Luke mentioned, this is a biodiversity hotspot globally, and that landscape is, of course, very dear to a lot of people, including myself and my family. My grandparents had a farm in this area, right in the heart of this landscape in here, which they'd farmed for over 20 years. And in fact, in the early 60s and 70s, my grandfather drove a bulldozer to clear large sections of native vegetation from the wheat belt. And for me to be able to take a role in restoring and recovering this ecosystem is very rewarding for both myself and my family. And of course, through the stewardship of Bush Heritage, in particular Ange Sanders and my predecessor Simon Smale, the backbone of this landscape has been steadily being restored over the past 15 years or so. But this really is a generational program of work, and we're really required to dedicated work over a number of years to be able to achieve our vision and connect up this landscape to provide habitat values for all the native fauna that live in the area. And as well as continuing to manage our existing properties and partnerships, our aspirations for this landscape is to continue to connect a lot of these remnant bushlands and to provide opportunities for our native fauna through the purchase of and restoration of new properties to create linkages, establishing partnerships with traditional owner organisations and individuals to work on that land and manage that land in the long term, but also to provide leadership within the region for conservation values and initiatives. And of course, none of this can be achieved without the generous support of our donors, supporters and volunteers and partner organisations, as well as that of our dedicated staff. And I'm really happy to welcome all of you to Ange Sanders, who's an ecologist who's been working in our region here for on connectivity conservation for over 25 years. She's been with Bush Heritage now for at least 12 years and is responsible for the coordination and monitoring programs within the Fitz-Stirling and Kojonup reserves. Angela gets a great buzz out of seeing this land being restored and the fauna returning to that landscape as well. And she'll be talking today about some of our concepts surrounding our work and some of the highlights from our recent monitoring programs. So I'll hand over to Angela and let you run through some of those details.
Okay. Hello everyone, it's great to be able to talk to you today, and thank you Alex for your introduction. I'll start by just introducing you to connectivity conservation. So as Alex said, that I've been working in that area for quite a long time. So in the mid-1990s, we started talking about connectivity conservation in the southwest of WA. And we started looking at satellite images and having a look where all the gaps were and maybe how we could try and restore some of that connectivity through the south coast landscape. So it's been going for quite a while, and we're still very much working on this, as Alex has said. And with the connectivity conservation, it's not just about having a full connected corridor between remnants of bush. It's also about providing protected areas, having stepping stones through the landscape, and also having linear corridors if the landscape allows that and the land use allows that. So there's a whole host of ways we can reconnect that landscape without having full vegetated corridors, as we call them. And that's what we're certainly working on in the Fitz-Stirling project area, which you can see on the slide. So we're in this central area here, and that's where we've been focusing our work for the past 10 years at least. So with the connectivity conservation, we're actually providing opportunities for organisms, and of course along with their genetic material, to permeate the landscape as they once did before we started clearing it. So we definitely know that we've provided the opportunities, and I'll be talking more about that in a later slide. But I'd just now like to talk about this in detail. I mean, Alex put this slide up, and I'll be covering a slightly different aspect of it. So we've got a mosaic of land uses and tenure across that area there. So we've got a mixture of conservation reserves, state government reserves, privately managed reserves. We've got farmland, which is mainly cereal growing and sheep, and we do have some cattle farms out there too. And we have a fair bit out there of unallocated Crown land. So there's opportunities there for that to act as conservation areas as well. So we've got a fair few creek lines, and in the scale of other parts of Australia, they're fairly small creeks, and all of them are naturally saline. So they've been saline out there for quite a long time, although they are now higher salinity than they were when we first settled the area. So we've got hills. It's very low relief through that country. We've got a few granite outcrops, not large, but granite outcrops nevertheless, and they're the ones that seem to be suffering the most with the drying out of the climate. And we've got an extraordinary level of plant diversity. So we've across the properties that we manage, we now have over 900 species of plant that have been recorded on those properties. And when we first bought them, we really had no idea that we were going to find this sort of floral diversity. So it's been really an amazing journey having a botanist looking at all those properties and cataloguing and mapping all the vegetation on those properties too. And very soon we will be in that area. There'll be joint management with Noongar people of one of the big reserves, the Peenyup Nature Reserve. We're hoping in that area, which will be really good for us and working in that area. We have 3 partnerships now. So the yellow coloured areas in the southern end of this, we have current partnerships with the privately owned bushland on these properties, and we help them manage it. And we have another prospective partnership in the pipeline that we hope will come along in the next couple of years at least. So many of the yellow and orange properties that you see on this map have areas of revegetation, and the reason we call it revegetation is some of it has just had the plants put back. When we step up and do a little bit more than that, we call it restoration. So we're actually restoring fauna habitat in those areas. So we started in 2004 on Cheraninup, and we've been steadily improving the revegetation as we go along. So the main aim, as I've said, is to create habitat for our native species of plants and animals. So you can see in the top picture there, that is our contractor. He's working on reseeding that paddock with native species rather than wheat. And we go about it in a very similar way, but we're using native seed instead of introduced grasses. So in this particular landscape, we see very few native birds and mammals and reptiles. You could count them on 2 hands. And we get a lot of introduced grasses and weeds in these areas. And so the bottom slide shows this very similar area as it's growing, and it's about 2 or 3 years old, I think, on that slide. So you can see that the landscape gets covered in native vegetation very quickly, and we can now record on our Monjabuk North property over 50 species of plants, and the wildlife started to respond almost immediately. So especially the birds, you can imagine they're fairly mobile. They fly in from the surrounding native vegetation, and they come and start breeding and feeding in these areas within about 2 years of us doing the restoration. And then they increase every year after that. And what we find is that while the revegetated areas are growing vigorously and they're providing lots of resources for the animals, we have a higher abundance and increasing number of species, and their activity increases in the restoration as compared to the native vegetation or our reference sites that we look at as well. So on Mongebuck North, our species list fauna species list is increasing, and 8 years after we first started, we've now got over 50 species of bird using the area, and a lot more smaller mammals such as the honey possum and pygmy possum, and quite a few more reptiles coming in. And I'll just show you now, this is an aerial view of a small patch on our Mongebuck North area that is showing the revegetation there. And in the centre of the slide, you can see right here, this is a malleefowl mound. And this really surprised us. They built the mound right next to the track, so we were able to find it fairly easily. But it was 5 years after the first plants were sown as seeds that the malleefowl recolonised Mongebuck North and built themselves a very large and very active and very productive mound. So it's really, really good news for us. And you might just be able to see a blue colour and 2 white bits of colour. They're people. So we were standing right next to the mound, so you can see it's quite a large mound, and it's still active and going really well. And this next slide shows the really, really good news. Is a slide on the left with Jeff standing there looking at a mound of dirt. That is actually a brand new malleefowl mound that we found a few weeks ago on Mongebuck North. And the birds had decided, for whatever reason, and we don't really know why they choose the areas they choose to build their mounds, they built it right on top of one of our pitfall trap lines. So you can see a little black flywire fence, and our trap is there with a lid on. There's a bucket set in the ground and the lid's on it. The malleefowl have built right over the top. So it was very interesting for us to find that. And Jeff and myself have visited the mound a few times, and the birds will actually, or one of the birds will stay on the mound and keep working while we watch them. So it's really exciting to know that this particular area was sown back to native vegetation in 2014. So it's really not that old. And we think the reason that the malleefowl like those areas is there are a lot of acacia which drop their leaves, which forms litter, and then the malleefowl scratch that into their mound to do the composting process with. And they also like to eat acacia seed. So there's an abundance of resources for them in the restoration at the moment. And we hope that continues, and we'll keep monitoring those mounds. And on the right, top right, you can see one of the cutest little honey possums, and this is why big reason why we're doing this restoration, especially the proteaceous enhancement, because these little creatures don't have teeth. They have a tongue that helps them eat pollen and nectar, and that's what they feed on exclusively. And so we need to keep the pollen and nectar up to them for 12 months of the year. And they've given us the tick of approval, and they're in our re-veg in quite large numbers. So it's really encouraging, and we're learning a lot more about growing proteaceous vegetation in the process. And the little critter in my hand on the bottom right-hand slide is a pygmy possum. And we've given these little critters a bit of a helping hand in that we've put out now just over 100 artificial nest boxes for them on Mongebuck North, and they colonise them almost immediately. They're sharing them with geckos, frogs and spiders, social huntsmen and other spiders, and cockroaches, crickets. So we've got a whole array of different invertebrates using these boxes, as well as the honey possums. So we've got good results from monitoring those possums again this year, and we've had lots of females with young in the boxes. So again, we're providing really good habitat for those animals as well. So this next slide is what has been the cause of most excitement for us this year. It was just really fantastic to find this photograph. So Jeff Pinder, who is working on our fauna recovery project in the Fitz-Stirling, he put out a lot of cameras to have a look for tamo wallabies, and also to keep track of fox and cat and rabbit activity in the Fitz-Stirling area. On the southern end of our Cheraninup property, this little animal is a red-tailed Phascogale. So it's really, really exciting for us, because we translocated 30 animals to our Kojonup Reserve in 2010 and 2011, and they're doing really well at the Kojonup Reserve. And we've been planning for the last few years to try and get permission to do a translocation to Cheraninup. But now we know they're actually already there. We probably won't need to do a translocation at all. We just have to do some more monitoring to find out just how many animals we have at Cheraninup. And of course, with the fauna recovery project and the feral animal control that we'll be carrying out for the next 5 years, that's definitely going to help these little animals as well. So just want to cover with you briefly just 2 of the research projects that we've got going in the area at the moment. And one of them is with the Flinders University, and we're looking at soil microbiome. So we're looking at the microscopic animals, algae, and fungi, etc., that are in the soil, that our native plants have symbiotic relationships with a lot of them, and we really have no idea what's going on under the soil surface out there. So we've just started this project, and I've collected all the soil samples, and they'll be starting doing the genetic work on those samples very soon. So we're hoping to have some results of that research by the middle of next year. So we're comparing areas of restoration with areas of native vegetation, so undisturbed areas. And we're also looking at areas that are naturally regenerating, and as well as disturbed areas, just to compare to see what the microbiome's doing. And what we're hoping is that will tell us how we can improve our restoration in years to come, maybe through manipulating soils, maybe through inoculating with different microorganisms. So we're not quite sure how that will pan out, but that's certainly what we're hoping for. And the other research project that is really exciting is that we're having a look at the red-tailed Phascogale genetics of the translocated population that is now living on our Kojonup Reserve. So, as I said, we moved 30 animals in 2010 and 2011, and they're doing really well. We monitor them every year. So now we've got a genetics program going with UWA, and we have a prospective student that is wanting to take it on. And we're collecting, in this slide here, we're actually on Kojonup in May this year, and we're collecting tissue, like a little bit of ear tissue from the Phascogales, ready for the DNA analysis that will happen next year. So what we're hoping to find out from this is the pedigree of those animals on Kojonup. So we hope to be able to establish how many of the foundation animals have contributed to that gene pool. And if it is too low and we have restricted genetic diversity, we will be looking at translocating more animals into that reserve to increase their chances of survival over the longer term. And what I want to talk to you about just briefly too is our fauna recovery project. So we've been funded by Lottery West for 5 years. to perform a integrated program across that Fitz-Stirling landscape. So it's the first program that we know of, probably in Australia, that has tried doing this sort of integrated project. So we're looking at fox, cat and rabbit control across that area, and to monitor the impact of that. So we want to know the impact not only on the feral animals, but we want to know the impact that will have on the native animals. So we'll see an increase in some of the native fauna. So the way that Jeff does this is you can see on the photograph, there's a camera in the foreground. So we set our camera up, and then in the background here, there's a lure, and there are 3 different types of lures on that bamboo pole there. We've got pencil, which acts as a visual lure to lure in the cats especially. And then there's a bit of a feather there that blows around in the wind and also acts as a visual lure. But we've also got scent lure down here. So there's a little jar here, and it's got a concoction of cat anal glands in it, which is pretty aromatic, I can put it that way. And the smell travels on the wind, and it brings in all sorts of animals, not just cats, but lots of different native wildlife and also introduced animals. So we'll be doing a lot of that camera trapping over the next 5 years. This is just some of the photographs that we've had in the last few weeks. So here you can see on the left a feral cat, very interested in the anal glands there. So we take note of the coat colour and the markings on the cat, and then after we've done the control, we can if we get this cat on a number of our cameras, then we can try different control methods to remove these persistent animals from the landscape. And on the right here, obviously we've got a fox that is very interested in that scent lure, and it's actually chewing the jar, and it destroyed the whole setup. But that's just the way the foxes act. And this last slide, not only do we get feral animals, we also get a lot of our native animals captured on these cameras. So on the left, we've got beautiful black glove wallaby or brush wallaby with a pouch young there. So they're doing reasonably well out in the Fitz-Stirling, but we'd certainly hope to see an increase in their numbers with feral animal control. And on the right there, you can see a train of echidnas. Now, I would doubt that I don't know for sure, but I would doubt that they're attracted to the lure. We just happen to put our camera out on one of the areas that they frequent. But in this photo, it's probably a female at the front being followed by 3 males, hoping to get a breeding opportunity. Yeah, we got quite a few photographs of echidnas this time when we put out the cameras. So it's good news for the echidnas. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll pass you back to Luke.
Thank you, Ange. I think everybody who's listening to Ange's presentation would realise you don't get summaries and details and stories like what we just heard without having extensive experience, 25 years and more, and a deep, heartfelt connection to the work. And Ange, it's just a pleasure and a privilege to be working with you. And the work you're doing for that landscape is incredible. And I think all the supporters online, you're part of this as well. So I think the support that our volunteers and our other partners in that landscape, and I know some of them are on this call, our donors and our bequesters, the fact that they can get behind and support this kind of landscape approach and a detailed approach to restoring our country is just incredible. So thank you. We have got a few questions, so we will get to those very, very shortly. And please, if you've got questions that are coming up now, please keep putting them in, because the ones we don't get to will still be responded to and sent out. And certainly there'll be a recording. There is a recording being made of this presentation that people will be able to access. I mean, I just think that was amazing, seeing the malleefowl nest on the trap line. I just think the malleefowl's gone, I'll give you something to deal with in your trapping. I'll actually put a nest right on your trap line, and that's I've never seen that before, and I've seen a lot of trap lines and a few mallee-fowl nests, but to see that that convergence is quite hilarious and very inspiring. So there's a few questions here, Alex and Ange, that we'll fire across to you, and then we'll wrap up after we've got through as many as we can. So the first question here is, have woylies been found on any of the Fitz-Stirling Reserves? And that's from Rowena.
No, unfortunately not. They disappeared from that landscape quite a few decades ago. It is one of our aspirational targets, if you like, for down the track, to reintroduce them to that area.
Yeah, and so that would, the work that you were talking about with the integrated feral animal project, if depending on what comes out of that, that's the kind of things that could come from this research project, do you think, Ange? Reintroductions of certain animals once we get the feral animal interactions sorted out?
Yeah. Once we can get that predator pressure relieved and give them a bit of, breathing space out there, we can start thinking about things like woylies. Yeah, for sure.
Great. And this one might be one for Alex. I'm sure you could answer it, Ange, but there's a lot here for you, which I'm going to throw back to you. But this one I reckon Alex can do. It's about visiting our reserves down there. And this is from Pam, and she's wondering, are we able to visit any of these reserves that we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Luke. And Pam, we always encourage people to come and visit and have a look at some of the reserves when they possibly can. Obviously, our reserves are by appointment only, but you can certainly get in touch with us through Bush Heritage and come and visit if you have an opportunity to come down this part of the landscape. And we're more than happy to show people some of the amazing flora, and possibly you might capture a quick glance of some of the fauna if you're lucky. It's a beautiful part of the world, and we've got these properties and manage these properties so that people can enjoy and interact with that landscape throughout. So absolutely.
Yeah. No, and Eddie Wagen, who's online, is also inviting people to visit his sanctuary, and Eddie and Donna are wonderful conservationists, along with many other great neighbours and partners we have down there. So good on you, Eddie, and you've been leading the way down there for many years. It's a pleasure to be working with you. And the other great thing just about visitation is that, and some of you would be aware of this, but Angela and Simon, we recently built an amazing field station down there called the Michael Chichbon Red Mort Field Station, and that's a base for people to come, not so much just general visitors, but we can host donor events and bequest events and a lot of science and community land care activities. So that's been really busy once the COVID restrictions have eased in WA, and to have a purpose-built base that's really sustainably designed, solar power, really composting toilets, great congregation areas for people to collect specimens and to talk about their days out in the field is a real treat. And it's the first time Bush Heritage has ever had a purpose-built research and field facility, so something we're really proud of. All right, back to you, Ange. There's a few specific ones here. There's great questions. So one is from Jane Browning. How do you source your seed for the revegetation works?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have well, it's not really a rule, but what we try and do is we try and source the seed from within 5 kilometres of where we're going to sow the seed, because we're working in such a biodiverse area, florally biodiverse, and it changes across the landscape so quickly. We need to source very local seeds. So local provenance is the word we use, and most of the seed that we have sourced is either from our properties or neighbour properties, or it's within 5 kilometres of the particular area that we're going to source. However, just saying that, we realise that there is such a high demand now for seed that we're starting to think about having our some of our areas as seed orchards, so that we've got a sustainable source of seed into the future.
Great. And there's a sort of a related question here. It was about, oh, I think it's been taken down, but it was about the planning of the restoration. So how you've used really experienced landscape designers or ecologists, haven't you, in how to lay out the designs for these?
Yeah, that's right, Luke. And what we do is we've engaged experienced restoration practitioners, and what they do first is map the soils and soil types. And we have a look at where we can, what sort of vegetation is there. So we'll have a few remnant trees and a few remnant bushes around the place, or we look in the bush next door or in the road verges, and we try and reconstruct what would have been there. And then we formulate a seed list, and we give that to the seed pickers. They can't pick all those different species, so we have to get a subset of those. So there's usually around 70 to 100 species that we do have the know-how on how to pick the seed, treat the seed, and also get the seed to germinate once it's out in the landscape there. So there's quite an involved process going into the planning, and also we have to plan for tracks, we have to plan for fire breaks, we have to plan for incorporating some sort of fauna microhabitat within all that. So we redistribute rock piles and mallee root piles back out into the landscape. So there's a bit of planning, a lot of planning that goes into a restoration project.
Yeah, no, that's great. There's a couple other quick ones, and we will try and finish on time, but I'm noticing that no one's dropping off, so that's a good sign. And we'll try and do one or two final questions, and then we'll wrap up. But it's great that you can stick with us, because this is such an exciting project and you're all such an important part of it. This one you could probably both have a crack at, but it's about fire management. And so what concerns do you have regarding fire in amongst the build-up of the understory? And then the second part of, and that's from Elizabeth. And then there's one from David, which is sort of related, and it's about how do we approach landholders in the area to impress on them the importance of participating in this sort of work. So it's about what's our relationship like with landholders in the area, and also a little bit more about fire management, if you could.
I'll take those if you like. In terms of fire management, we've had a number of surveys done on the properties that we manage within the Fitz-Stirling. There's generally a relatively low fire risk for our properties that's been determined from those assessments. However, we still need to be really diligent about managing the fire risks on our properties. So making sure that we have fire breaks where we possibly can, and reducing the fuel loads in some of the areas that have been indicated to have slightly higher fuel loads. We're working to establish partnerships with Noongar or traditional owner organisations to do some cultural burning practices across some of our properties, and we'll be hoping to develop that capacity over the next 12 to 18 months, which is really small scale, low intensity burns to provide both regenerative capacity within some of the senescing bushland, but also to provide protective areas, so that if there is a fire, there's an opportunity to be able to control that into smaller patches. It's a really important part of our relationship building with our neighbours, but we've found, and certainly with the support and assistance of people like Eddie and Donna, who are some of our partner conservation partners within the landscape, that we're pushing out some really good conservation concepts within the community. We're getting some really great support and buy-in from the neighbouring landholders, who certainly their taking some really great ownership of the natural bushland within some of their own properties, and we're working alongside of them to help support conservation efforts within that landscape and really create that connectivity that's pivotal to maintaining all of the amazing fauna and flora that we've seen from Angela's slides. So hope that answers your question.
It does, yeah. No, it's great. Yeah, fire management's front and centre, and digging deeper and working with traditional owners is a key part of where we're going in the future. And also, just as many of you would be aware, Bush Heritage values our role as a community member, and understands that we've got to work together with all land users, private land users, government, to try and work together to create the next era of land management that better supports biodiversity conservation and traditional owner involvement. And that's something we need to do together. We don't just want to buy our land and sit on our laurels. We want to share and talk and bring more people on this journey that you're all critically part of. I think that's all we're going to have time for. Jane Browning's asked one quick one that I can answer, which is, do you do contour for maximum water retention in the seeding? Angela and Simon have shown me that they do that. So yes, that's an easy one. We certainly work with the contours, but the rest of the questions we will type up and send out to you all. And I just want to take this opportunity, because I know you're all very busy and there's lots going on, to thank you all very much for attending this session. It means a lot for all Bush Heritage staff, and there's other Bush Heritage staff that are not presenting, so on this call, just listening in, and to know that they're part of this conversation, and that there's nearly 80 supporters or volunteers that are listening to this, is really gives us a real boost when we can't see you all as often as we'd like at the moment. But to know that you're out there and you're still passionate about conservation and land management is wonderful. So thank you to all of those online who have made a gift to us. It means a lot, whether that's a gift you've already given or a gift that's in the will. It's a huge sense of confidence that people are backing us with those sort of gifts. And, just encourage those that haven't to keep thinking about it. We're really open to talking about our work, sharing it so you've got confidence in the quality of what we do, and that this is a lasting investment that's making a difference to little areas like the Fitz-Stirling, then it builds up to areas like WA and then like Australia and the world. We're really committed as we get bigger and more effective to using our influence to make the country of Australia a better place, but also sharing it with others around the world, because these are really globally significant stories, as Ange has shared with us today. Please give us feedback on the forum. It always helps. This is a new thing for us. Usually we're sitting in small town halls with you all in front of us. So this has been a big learning year, as all of you would know, particularly our supporters and friends in Melbourne. So we acknowledge that this is a different way of engaging, but nonetheless important. So if you've got any feedback on what worked or what didn't work, please be in touch with Anna. And yeah, just thanks again for everything you've given to Bush Heritage, and it's been lovely to spend some time with you this morning or this afternoon, depending on which side of the continent you're on. And take care. So we'll leave it there, and the recording will be up on the web as soon as Anna's organised to do it, which may be a day or maybe a couple of days. So thanks again for all your support.
There's no one like you. You rip apart the clouds.